everyone. So, welcome to Motorbike 101, the podcast where we help educate everyday motorcycle enthusiasts to help improve their motorcycle riding skills. And here today we have a special guest. He's a everyday motorcycle enthusiast, Brett,
Hello, James. How
uh,
are you?
doing great. And he has over a couple of decades of riding motorcycles. Um,
Mm, at least.
yeah, at least. So he has a wealth of wisdom that I think everyone can get a lot from. So can you take a few minutes to give your background in terms of your motorcycle journey and just your overall experience with motorcycles that you want to share?
Certainly, James. That started many years ago as a university student was my first motorbike. Okay, take away the playing around as a teenager with little Honda step-throughs. I don't know if they make them anymore. I don't think so. 50cc or 75cc motorbikes. It's just kids playing around. Remove that because that was all illegal anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
life as a student, it was an inexpensive form of transport and just getting around the campus. But in the town I was living in, it was just easier than driving the car. So that was when I bought my first motorbike. It was a Yamaha 250cc Enduro. I bought it in another town I was living in. I was working at a mine, getting some money together as a student. And yeah, I went into a motorbike shop and I had an idea I wanted to do it. So one, it was recommended, liked the look of it, the price was right, so I bought it.
Were you
Having,
looking at other options because that is like the Enduro is a dual bike. It's a how would you describe that? Because I'm not familiar with that.
okay, as a bike, it was not, let's just put it, it wasn't built for comfort so much as moving around. It was built for more rugged. It had a higher travel, so a bit like the motocross bikes that you see. So it had a much higher seat and much higher travel in the shock absorbers, knobby tires, much more agile, not heavy. And why did I buy that model? Because I didn't really think about what I was going to be doing apart from just commuting. But it had flexibility. It means I could take it off road, off the bitumen,
Hmm.
without. I didn't really know. I was just thought, well, that's more a rounded motorcycle. So I bought that, and the first thing I did was get on it, ride out of town. I didn't even have a license then. Rode out of town, and I just rode. And the reason I rode was just to get used to it. And that's as simple as that. I can still remember actually. This is a long time ago. This is 40. What am I now? Excuse me. This is 45 years ago. So it was a long time ago. But I've got very clear images of it. So anyway, had a lot of fun with that motorbike. But in my third year of university, I decided to upgrade because I graduated and I thought I'm going to give myself a graduation present. So I bought myself a Yamaha road bike. And I'm not the sort of rider who was really into big bikes, fast bikes, a hero. I'm not that sort of. I like riding. I love the outdoors and the freedom of it. But I'm not a high risk rider, if that makes sense. I'm more common sense. I like to be able to know I'm going to get to the end of my trip so I can do it again, rather than the thrill of the just missing out and just falling off, all that sort of stuff that a lot of blokes do.
Hmm.
So I'm not a hero in that space, but at least I kept on riding. I've only been off a couple of times. One of those I was stationary. Anyway, and that was a bigger bike, another story. So Yamaha XS400, lovely little bike, and a new model. So that was my graduation present to myself, and I rode that for years. And I did a bit of touring on it, and I drove between cities here in Australia, which, as many would appreciate, has got large distances. But then I realised that it didn't have the power really that I needed. It was good to go from A to B, and I could sit on 100 kilometres, 110 kilometres an hour over here, which is 60 to 70 miles an hour. But that's about all it would do,
Hmm.
and I had to wind it up to get. So that was that, and I was going to upgrade, but then I ended up getting married, having children.
Uh,
And
just just with the Yamaha motorcycle, can you share with our audience the specs of that, the weight, and
Ah,
also the horsepowers, because
yeah.
I don't think people would know that.
Okay. The first one was the 250cc.
Yep.
I can't remember direct specs. The second one was a 400cc, so it was more powerful, but it was a more of a commuting. It was a road bike,
Hmm.
so it was a totally different bike to the first one. The only
Because the first
similarity
one
was
was a dirt bike, whereas
uh,
the other one is,
designed to go off road. That's right.
yeah.
Where
Hmm.
but I rode it on road. Second one, don't take it off road at all because yeah, you do that at your peril. So it was
Hmm.
designed a lot lower, more grunt, and it was twin cylinder versus the first one was a single cylinder. So a bit more and a four stroke. The first one was a two stroke,
Hmm.
and two strokes are very torquey. They'll get going very quickly, but they don't have a lot of grunt. So low, what that means, low down. So they will, if all the revs are low, it'll stall easy. But a two stroke, a four stroke motor will go better at lower revs. So anyway, that's what I had. And then fast forward into, when I was a more mature adult, as it were, and in fact, my marriage fell apart, and after 18 years, and I hadn't ridden much in that space. I ended up selling the 400cc, and as a parent and responsible parent, and having a wife who didn't like me riding a motorbike as well, in that context, I sold it. But when I divorced, I had my own. I didn't have anyone breathe out my shoulder, so that's when I really got serious about it. I thought, okay. And I went and bought myself, after much research, a touring bike. I bought myself a
Hmm.
BMW 1100 R, 1100 RT, actually, well, RT 1100R. So that was a touring bike, big, and I can tell you that weighed 250 kilos. That's a lot of motorbike. That's including the panniers. It's, for those of you who know BMWs, they are heavy, but they are beautifully manufactured and beautifully machined. The balance on them is amazing. And I hadn't actually been on a bike for quite a while when I sat on this bike. I rode it down the street in first gear, got into second gear, turned the corner, and I was turning around. Remember, I hadn't ridden for a long time, and I realised I was turning at low speed. I was doing a U-turn, and I didn't have to put my feet down. And I thought, that's what sold me on the BMW, the balance of a big bike, 1100cc. So for those of you who know their motorbikes, their boxer engines, so they've got the cylinders out the side,
Hmm.
twin cylinder again, but the weight and balance of I thought, that's it, I'm gone. So again, sheer comfort. And we're talking about bikes here that have got other bits and pieces that the majority of bikes don't have, a top-end touring bike. I compared that against other brands. I was looking at Triumphs. I was looking at Ducatis, but not for touring. That was just more for fun. So that's where I ended up, and I've been riding. And I bought another one, but I've been riding those bikes now for 15, 16 years. And two up, you can carry two people. They're designed for two people. Panniers, top box. Go away for a week easily. Problem is, you get caught speeding easily too. So it's been expensive.
Hmm.
So
So
that's a bit of the
during,
background.
yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. We went very deep into um, your background, and it's actually it's actually longer than 2 decades that you've been writing, but you had a break in between. So
Yes, I had a little
yeah,
holiday in there. Yes.
yeah. Okay, great. So we'll start with our first question, and that is, can you give our listeners what you believe um, would be the biggest tip that you can give on overcoming their fear on riding a bigger motorcycle? A motorcycle that may be a little heavier, a little wider and taller for them to from what they're used to riding.
Mm. The biggest tip I carry, no matter what size motorbike, and I alluded to it before, is don't be a hero. Get and ride your motorbike in traffic as if you're driving a car, because you cannot trust cars to know you're there. So if you're going to survive on a motorbike, and I have heard so many stories about um, people having accidents, being hit by cars, running into cars, for all, and a lot of it is, and I see it, I've witnessed it. Guys, particularly, just being disrespectful of the traffic environment that they're riding in, thinking that they're bulletproof. And so the first thing is to respect the environment that you're riding in. But in the early days, be really focused on getting used to the bike. And if you shouldn't, and you won't ride a big heavy bike first up. So you should be an experienced rider to some degree. You should be able to handle a motorbike and know where the controls are. So they're not a thing to learn on. So we know where the brakes are, we know where the clutch is and the front and back brake, etc. But with a bigger bike, everything changes because you've got more momentum, you've got more power taking off, it takes you longer to slow down. You need to get to know it, and the best way to do that is not with a pinion on, but just go out and ride and test yourself. And the other thing is, I don't anyway, ride. A lot of people ride when they're experienced with music. I don't ride with music. For me, riding in itself is meditative, but you must be totally in the groove and riding it, and understand when you're going around corners and big bends that if you hit that bend too quickly, or it's sharper than you realise, you'll find that you come offline really easily. So you just got to drop off the power, and the bike will just fall back into line. Just the reverse, if it's a lot bigger bend and you're not going it fast enough because you think it's a tighter bend, and then you'll start turning before you actually want to. The bike will start to go in sooner, so you put more power on. So it's not the sort of thing where you're turning the handlebars, but you need to know your bike and understand your bike and to how it's going to respond. So it's just time in the saddle, get used to it. And if you're going to be riding two up, it's a passenger, I think you call them in the US and Canada, but pillion, we call them a pillion here in Australia. You need to be comfortable on your bike. You need to understand the bike and what it's capable of doing and what your capability on the bike is. But then that applies to any motorbike, particularly for learners. It's a wonderful experience. If you're riding around and commuting, don't take the traffic for granted. You do develop an intuitive sense of what's around you, but that would mean you, and I don't ever, even these days, I never stop checking my mirrors. And if I find I'm being boxed in, I like to get out because I don't trust the cars. Simple as that. I don't trust them. Implicitly, I do not trust cars, and I'm a car driver. So that's a good filter to see things through.
Also, when you're turning on bends, what would you say to other riders how they can be more confident in knowing how to lean into bends and turns without getting into an accident?
Well, the chances are very high chance if there's no gravel around, it's a good sealed road, there's no wet weather, it's dry, there's nothing else around, you won't get into an accident. Because you've got enough, full stop. You will not get into an accident unless you have a mechanical failure. There's enough space on the road, particularly if there's no other traffic around. There's plenty of space to try things and learn things. So take the lines, the centre lines as a guide. Enter a corner, and it's important to understand around cornering, hitting the apex of a corner, whether you're driving a car or a motorbike. So you cross the apex, so you enter then, and then you're coming out. But if you want to lean more, just to experience it, lean more. That's it. But then what does it feel like? What does it feel like? Because you look at the guys on riding, super bikes and the racing riders. They are at silly angles, but the dynamics of a motorbike means that you actually must have speed. The more speed you have doesn't mean you're going silly fast. It just means the more speed you have into a corner, the safer you will be. The less speed, the more likely you are to fall over. You need to have speed to go into the corner and come out of it. So you need to understand the dynamics of a motorbike. It's not a car where you're turning the wheel to turn around the corner. You're actually leaning the bike, and it's the lean that creates the turn. So you do have to turn around when you're going slowly. So the thing to do is try, experiment, do it in a safe environment. create your environment, find it where there's nothing. Don't have gravel around. Anything loose in the road will contribute to. Now, the only times I've come off was in ice, night time, and it was actually rain, but it was winter time. It may have been a bit of ice, but I just went around the corner, but it was and a familiar corner. It was just around the corner from my home. A little bit fast,
Mm-hmm.
and the front wheel just slid out. Boom. Just went out from underneath me. So, and the other thing is, respect the elements. Respect the conditions you're riding in. Understand them. And again, don't be a hero. You don't need to be. Just enjoy the riding.
Yes. And just on that topic, uh, what would you say is the biggest reason why motorcycle riders oftentimes take more risk than they should, or try to be that hero?
All right, boys. Who's listening? Males. There's a stage, it's acknowledged, there's a stage in life where males typically think they're bulletproof. 16 up through to 25, 30, depending upon how mature they are. So there are a lot of people who are in fear of motorbikes, so they might be bulletproof in another environment. But a lot of guys out there, it's the buzz that you get. It's the buzz of being in the now, the speed. There's no doubt it is buzzy. And some guys more than others have a higher threshold of fear, but it's the adrenaline rush. That's what they're getting from it. The silly thing is, you can go and do that out there in the bush. You can go and do that on your enduro, on your motocross bikes, or you can go out onto a racetrack. But why would you do it in an environment where there's cars? It's like running around in the jungle of Africa and taking on the elephants. Like, you're not going to win. A motorbike is not going to win against a car. Simple as that. Hit the car, go over the top. Hit the car on the side, straight into it. There's so many options. So why? And that's just if you're hitting a vehicle. The number of fatalities that happen on motorbikes, a lot of them are single vehicle situations where they just stopped focusing. They stopped concentrating on what they're doing. And when you're in traffic, particularly, you cannot predict what that car in front of you, who doesn't even know what he's doing himself or herself, half the times. So, like I said, ride and respect the traffic. You can go between traffic when it's stationary or very slow, and not likely to be changing. But in the full flow, no way. I've seen guys going straight down, and I thought, I'm on the motorbike and I get a fright because what if I'm about to turn in and make a turn? Bang! It's for me. It's crazy, it's silly. So it's respect your environment, respect other drivers and riders, and respect yourself.
Thank you. So the next question I have for our listeners is, what would you say are the top safety practices you would consider taking your bike on a long ride? So let's say like a 3+ hour ride across town.
3+ hours across town when you could be riding very far, very slowly if you're going across town. The thing around riding again is I call it mindset, but it's getting into the right headspace. Again, when you're a familiar rider and your commute and you're always riding a motorbike, you don't have a car, you're just riding a motorbike all the time, it's easy to take things for granted because you're just so used to it. It becomes second nature. And as long as your second nature is, again, as I was saying, respectful of what's around you, then you will ride accordingly. But if you're used to riding across town, a 3-hour ride, so when I say across town, that's going to be a long ride, but through the city, maybe out into the country, again, but more importantly, I think if you're going to do something that's not used to doing, that's probably a better way to look at the question, then you need to prepare for it mentally. Because if you're going riding into new territory, you're on a main road, but if you've got to go and find somewhere out there, the modern bikes these days, some of them bikes you can got your map in front of you, you've got Google Maps, or you've got Garmin's or whatever. But if you don't have a newer bike or you don't have that technology set up, you've got to keep it in your head. And then if you haven't got it in your head, you've got to be stopping and checking your phone. Are you going the right way? So be mindful of those things. Just create chunks of the trip. Okay, well, I need to go from here to here. I'll memorize that and then do it. Then you'll create the next chunk. So it's just understanding where you're at. But it's when you're doing new rides, new experiences, new areas. That's when you've got to be just a bit more switched on, consciously switched on, I think, so that you're not taking things for granted. It's not a matter of riding along, committing to memory. I think it's around here. Oh, there it is. And you're in the right-hand lane, or in Australia, but the bottom lane, if you're in a centre lane of a two-lane road and you've got to cut across, and there's the street that you wanted to go down, what are you going to do? You're just going to go turn? Oh, whoops, I forgot to check in the mirror. Is there traffic there? No, you shouldn't. You should go down, stop, and work your way back to that street. So don't just react to that sort of thing. So that's what I mean. Don't go into it as if it's familiar territory. Go into it as if it's you're respecting it again. Versus a country ride, which is a bit different.
For you, have you done more country riding or in the city riding?
Or way more country riding. See, go back to what I say. I don't trust cars. I've done a lot of commuting in my younger years, smaller bike, but my bike now, it's too big. Once that's too big, it's a heavy bike and it's not good for the stop and start in the city. You know, I can only get into third gear maximum, but usually in second gear because of the speed limit and the way the speed the bike goes at in those gears. So it's not much fun, you know. I just want to get out and open up and just sit on the right speed. I won't say the speed limit because it's usually more than that, but
Absolutely. So for our listeners, what tips would you give on picking their first motorcycle? You having upgraded from a 250 to a 400 to now a 1100cc bike. What would you advise a new rider in choosing their first motorcycle?
A new rider, I would not typically choose what I did. I would choose, I won't give a brand away, but it'll be a Honda. No, anything that's equivalent to a Honda CB 250. That's an old model typically, but a 250 is a good size motorbike to learn on. You can learn on a smaller CC motorbike if you wish to, but the 250 gives you enough to move forward because you need to also learn to cope with speed at some degree. So you don't want to be able to reach that speed, and you also need to be able to cope with getting going pretty quickly. So some bikes can pop their front wheel very easily. A lot of guys do that, and that's great. But in learning, again, you don't want something that's going to get too, what they call peaky, because if you get too sharp on the throttle and it pops up, over you go. And so you've got to learn to handle the throttle. Just get something that's going to give you a sense of the experience. Even if you don't buy one, even if you hire one, something for lessons, or if you want to take lessons. But for me, the best lessons are the ones you teach yourself. I've never had a lesson from a motorbike rider, an instructor. My wife did. She thought she would do that, and she ended up running him over. And that was the last time she she rode a motorbike. She sold it. That's another story. But so smaller. I think maximum size, certainly in Australia, is a 250cc to learn on. Then you get your Ps and you can get your license. But you don't need to get any bigger from a learning perspective. Ideally, though, if you're serious about riding motorbike, you won't have that bike for long. Just do your work, get comfortable, and it's like driving a car to start with. Get out in the traffic, stay behind a car, follow the car, don't be a hero, don't be in a hurry. Just learn where all the dials are and the levers and whatever you're doing. Get used to that. It's got to become second nature. So when you want to stop, you don't put your foot on the floor like your car. You squeeze your brake. Okay? That's got to be automatic. That has to be automatic. So that's why a smaller bike or a 250 is big enough weight to have to learn to control, but you're not going to get into trouble. Unless it's a 250 performance bike of some kind. Some of them are. So don't go about being
Yeah,
smart. Go about surviving and learning, and then you can go and get smarter as you get better.
great. And typically, what what would you say is a good time frame for the rider to get used to that entry level motorcycle
Ha. Well,
before, or
how
is it depend, is it just depends?
yeah, and it absolutely
Hmm.
depends. It's not about time frame overall. It's time in the saddle. That is time on the bike.
Hmm.
So if you want to graduate and move up to a bigger bike, and you want to have other things that you want to do, and I'm not talking about guys who learn on the farm and then they've got to go and get a license. I'm not talking about that sort of thing. I'm talking about someone who hasn't done anything like this and who decided to take on using a bike, or it may be a scooter, driving around in traffic just as a little commuter. You've still got to get used to it. There's no better way to do that than experience, than actually doing it. And so if you want to get and graduate up into a bigger bike sooner than later, spend more time riding. Spend more time in the saddle. So that means every day, as much as possible. Just get out, because a part of riding in the city, it's not the bike, as I said before, it's the traffic. It's getting used to traffic. It's understanding when the person in the front car there, if they're paying attention, if they're turning their head a lot, they're getting set to make a turn. You also know if they're not paying attention to what's going on. People are still on the phone. Oh, it's crazy. They're people you don't want to be near. Seriously. You do not want to be near them. I've not mentioned anything else, but one thing to get into the habit of is protective clothing as well, particularly when you're learning. When you're not as confident.
Hmm.
If you're going to have a topple off the bike, don't be afraid of that. At low speed, it's not going to hurt you. It'll dent your pride. It might hurt the motorbike, but
Hmm.
it won't hurt you. It's when you're not going fast. Even if it's, 40 or 50 kilometres an hour. What's that? 40 miles an hour? 30, 40 miles an hour? Yeah, it'll frighten you if you do come off at that speed, but it's unlikely to really hurt you. But I can tell you what,
Hmm.
the only way you'll do that is if you're not paying attention and you run into something. That's happened to me before. I didn't come off, but I hit a big gutter, I can tell you that. Gave me a fright. Or else you're not paying attention around the traffic around you. You're not paying attention to the conditions. You've got gravel on the road. It starts to get wet. Light rain causes slippery. So little things like that, be aware. But that's around riding and driving, because you should be doing that in the car as well. So paying attention. Don't take anything for granted.
Absolutely. Safety first. And
Yep.
that leads to my next question is, as a new rider and to our listeners, what would you advise them to have as their starting gear when riding their motorcycle? What are the essentials and the necessary equipment that they should have before they get on the motorcycle?
Okay, well, let's start with the legal requirements. I think helmets are a legal requirement in the US now, aren't they? They used to not be, I know that. So a
Yes.
helmet's a given. And do not skimp. That doesn't mean buy the most expensive helmet, but don't get cheapies just because they're just not built the same. I've got a Shoei, and it's one of the better brands out there. It cost me $600, and that's probably too long ago now. But the reality is, it's going to save your head if you pop off. And if you do fall on a helmet once, that's it. No matter if you cannot see a scratch or a crack, you don't know what structure or damage you may have caused, you've got to replace it. That's a rule of thumb across the board,
Hmm.
board. So your helmet's a given. The other thing to talk to experts, go to the shops and listen to people who have ridden, because comfort of your helmet is really important. You don't want it to be too loose. You don't want it to be wobbling around on your head. It needs to be firm, particularly when it's strapped on. Most helmets you can get different padding requirements, so it is firm. but it must be firm on your head without being tight. Because if you've got a fat head like me, some builds of helmets will be too tight across here, and it creates a headache when I'm touring, and that's not a good thing at
Hmm.
all. So it must be comfortable. That's the first thing, and you pay for it. It's worth it. The next thing, again, it depends if you're commuting, if you do a lot of distance riding and touring, that sort of thing. I bought my gear with the intention of doing that. So I bought dry rider was what I bought. I didn't buy leather. I bought dry rider, and there's a reason for that. Leather's expensive, but also when it gets wet, it doesn't dry quickly. It gets clingy. So I bought dry rider as a brand. There's other brands of things. I'm not going to recommend one over the other. I've tried a few different ones, but I'm very happy with the dry rider. It's got a jacket and it's equipped for all seasons. So I got that for a reason. So I can have a shell when it's quite warm, but then I can have a liner, which is wind protection and water protection, because it's
Hmm.
not the outside's not waterproof, and then I can have a heat, which is quilting, insulation for when it gets really cold, and then I also got a thermal shirt garment because where I ride now, it snows up in the mountains here, so it gets really chilly. So, and it can be
Hmm.
cold. So when you get riding, you don't want to be feeling that cold because I can tell you what, it gets through you pretty quick if you don't have the right gear on. Similar with the pants, so they go with that. They had the same construction. Boots, another thing. Do not skimp. Comfort, but also ease of putting on. There's different ways to do that. I've got zippers and I've got Velcro tabs. I enjoy both. The Velcro tabs don't feel sometimes as if they're firm enough, but they are. The zippers give you a better sense of tightness. Some people do use work boots. I don't. I've got motorbike boots deliberately for it. Very comfortable and comfort. But as a tourer, comfort is the way to go. Yeah. If you're not a tourer, if you're a commuter, certainly a jacket. You can get Kevlar lined jeans, which is probably a good habit to have it if you do a lot of riding. Again, the number of people guys particularly, but girls who ride little scooters around. And I know if you see through different Asian countries because it's a dime a dozen and everyone drives around. There's four up on the family motorcycle and thongs and skirts and shorts and singlets and all well and good. But they know how to ride. They've been riding since this high. I know in Australia, a lot of people go here to Bali. One of the biggest causes of deaths of Australians in Bali is, in fact, they're not allowed to now, was motorbike riding. Because they didn't know how to ride them. They just thought they could. And seriously, a lot of deaths in that way. So get the gear. Everyone has a story to tell about falling off a motorbike and not having the right gear. If you want to do that and get a big rash down the side of your leg and on your arm, then do that. Even at low speeds, you'll get that'll happen to you. So if you want to avoid that, and I'm not saying I do this all the time, mind you. Experienced riders, and I don't try and do anything. So I've been known to ride down to the beach just to have a ride and go down and have a cup of coffee. I never wear thongs, never ever wear thongs. I wear runners, but I've worn shorts and t-shirt. It's so tempting. But 10-minute ride and I say but until so. But I've been doing it a long time, and it's a route. Certainly, if you're amongst traffic, as I said, respect it. And if you're not used to it, you just need to wear the gear that's going to protect you. If you're just commuting, if you're not going to do any touring, if it's purely commuting, you may not want to invest in the gear, in the clothing, in the jacket and the pants, but then certainly wear something that's over the top. Because a normal jumper or a sweatshirt, that'll just wear straight through when you hit the road.
Hmm.
Again, it's respect the situation.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And
I forgot, sorry,
for the
James,
motorcycle, yep.
I forgot gloves.
Okay, yes.
The one thing you never do go out, you always must have a helmet and gloves. Fall off hands first,
Hmm.
skin. Sounds weird. You can do a skinned knee, but not skinned
Mm.
hands.
No. And what's your thoughts on um like knee pads or elbow pads and um spine protection?
Um, the jacket and pants that I have came with pads in them, and so
Hmm.
you'll find, you might wear as a commuter just going out and after you might put a jacket on, which is more of a leisure jacket style jacket, even if it is leather, but it's not
Hmm.
designed for motorbike riding, but it does the job of protecting you from the elements. It keeps you warmer and that sort of thing, keeps the bugs off you, which you will get hit by. But when you're getting purpose designed and built gear, it'll have pads in there. You can buy extra
Hmm.
padding. I bought a back pad for my touring. This is in my naive way. I thought, well, if I'm riding a motorbike and I come off and ride on my back, I should have a back shield, which I bought. I used it, 2 or 3 times. And that was a trip across Australia until I realised it
Hmm.
was really hot. so, and the chances of using it were probably reduced the better I got, the more experience I got in riding. So I've still got it there, but I don't use it. But certainly the other padding and jackets have a sort of rubber pad in the back as well. Actually,
Right. Is there any particular brands you would suggest that new riders should go with?
I've only tried a couple of brands and because I'm very happy with them. Alpine boots, dry rider is the gear that I ride. I've got gloves for summer, gloves for winter, like gauntlets. My first gloves were gauntlets, and I really enjoyed them, but they're too hot
Hmm.
in summer, and so I just get wrist length gloves, and a lot lighter, but certainly insulated gloves for colder weather, and
Hmm.
insulated and waterproof gloves if you're going to be riding winter, but in a sort of wet environment. Because I have to say, when you do, and I have been drenched in rain, in spite of the waterproof nature, when you're riding at 100 odd kilometres an hour against really heavy rain, it's going to find creeks and crevices and cracks and whatever, not creeks, but cracks and crevices in you. The water will just get forced up, so you do end up wet.
Right.
And your gloves, they're just going to get wet, simple as that. And it's just uncomfortable riding like that over time. So as much waterproofing, but in the summer, no, just something that's going to breathe, but still be able to protect you.
So it's essential that riders should have winter riding gear and also summer riding gear in mind for
Uh,
for the seasons.
you should be able to, and you will be able to buy gear that accommodates all seasons. Like I said, like I
Hmm.
explained, both my jacket and pants. And I've got two sets of gear. One I did have one from each side of the country when I was moving across, and I had a motorbike on each side of the country. Um, Both the same BMW to mine, so that's why. But yeah, if it's summertime, I just do not put the layers in there. I will just ride just with the shell. It's still protective against abrasion and
Hmm.
coming off, but it will let the wind in, and you want the wind to come in to cool you down because it gets quite warm. Similarly with the
Right.
gloves, I never ride without gloves ever. Um, and the boots, and you get socks. But when you go and kit up, and you speak to the people who know what they're talking about. If you're still learning and getting comfortable, listen to the advice. If you've got a budget, great. Well, then do shop around. There's different price points and different standards of gear. Um, I'm sure James will be talking to more about specific types of gear and accessories in time. So continue listening to the podcast. But certainly, as a brand which I found really affordable, not the cheap end, but affordable and good quality dry rider is more than wonderful. And I've used it 15 years in touring. My
Hmm.
early days, I would just get a hack. I got an old sort of faux leather jacket and jeans, and I didn't equip myself in the same way just around town.
All right.
And I remember
Great.
I was younger too. I was bulletproof back then.
Hmm. So for our new riders out there, when when they have all their equipment and their motorcycle all ready to go, what would you suggest um, that they can do to continue improving their skills and become a better rider, because in the beginning they're focused on just getting their license, getting accustomed to the bike, but what should they be doing after that?
Good question, actually. Um, and I sort of answered it in part before. Time in the saddle,
Hmm.
time riding. And as you get comfortable at one level of riding, remembering it's like a car. I talk to people about driving cars, you know. If you think you got your license, you don't. You've just got a legal permission to learn to do what you want to do. A driver's license is not doesn't mean you can drive a car. It just means you can operate it. Can go forward and back, ideally not sideways. That's it. You've got to learn to drive in whether roads, dirt roads, windy roads, traffic roads, distances, all different. And same with a motorbike. So if you're going to limit your riding to one environment, typically, I mean, I can imagine there's people out there who are just not interested in riding, 3 days to another place and then have to turn around and come back after 2 nights there. That doesn't interest them at all. That's fine. Then you don't have to be concerned about that. But you do, if you're just using it to ride between home and work, well, then that's what you need to do. But if you're bored just sitting on a little scooter or a smaller motorbike and hum-de-ha, well then, and you want to experience riding differently, then get comfortable, but be aware of what it is that you want to experience. Because to commute makes it easier, it's also inexpensive. But if you want to get out and feel a real sense of freedom, that's what touring's about. And that's what riding's about. And and there's other bikes, not just touring bikes, but sports bikes as well, where you are riding, you are at one with the motorbike. And typically, guys, I'm not going to separate the genders, but there are more and more women out there doing it, and they are really good. And you see them out in the road because they're at one with the bike. Now, if you're going to do that, if you want to do that, you just have to go and get the motorbike that's going to allow you to do it. Join a group. You will learn a lot from other riders, but at the end of the day, you have to learn how the bike is going to handle when you put it in situations. And so you do it. Do it in slow motion. I can remember once, early days, when I had my motocross bike, we went out for a course, and it was jumping, and it was a trek for motocross course. And that's jumps, and there's mud, and there's tight corners, and everyone's racing around, a bunch of guys and girls that we're having fun with. And we had time, we'd time each other, and by the time we'd finished that afternoon, we were all riding that course faster, way faster than when we started. Why? Same motorbikes. The reason was because we got used to it. We got used to, so if I'm coming that corner, put the brake on now. Whereas when we started, we didn't know when to put the brake on. So you try it, and then you go deeper into the corner before you put the brake on. You just have to do more and more of it and try more and more things, and you learn. It's a feedback loop. Sometimes when we stretch it, that's when we come off. So don't stretch it. Don't use too much speed. Get to know your bike first. And then you'll get a bit faster, but it's the lean, coming out of corners with the power on, going in under brakes, all that thing. But it's meditative. You get one with the bike. You just get right in here. You need to be totally focused and clear on what you're doing. All types of riding, really, but particularly touring and sports riding. But just do it. You have to experience it. You got to go and do it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brett. So that's most of the time that we have. Do you have any parting words or a last advice to new riders out there? I know you covered a lot and almost everything under the sun, but if there was something you didn't um, share with our listeners, what would that be?
I'll tell you. Maybe it's based on a story. My sister is also a motorbike rider, and she rode across with the country with me once. Australia's a big country, and she rides a BMW GS 1200. Now, the GS
Mm,
1200 is an off-road bike, or on-road off-road, but enduro bike, but they're a big bike, much higher than mine. She's a tall girl and she's a strong girl, but they're a big motorbike. I can still remember the time when she bought her first motorbike. And if you're, it doesn't matter what, if you're a male or female, be mindful that it's a fair chance your parents won't want you to have a motorbike. Fair chance. As long as you're of age, don't ask permission. That's my advice. Because you're going to get a no. Then what are you going to do? Well, I didn't, but I was already left home.
Mhm.
But my sister hadn't left home. She was living at home. And one day she went out to work and she came back and she came and said, "Hey, Mum, look what I've got." Now, she had bought herself a Suzuki 650cc motorbike. She'd already had a license,
Wow.
got that sorted
Hmm.
out. There you
Yep.
go. My mother was not impressed at all. But what's she going to do about it? So, don't ever ask for permission if no is not an option. That was that would be my advice to anyone starting out, because you don't want to
Just
have to
get
do
the
and
motorcycle. Mhm.
get the motorbike. But again, like I said at the
Yep.
start, treat it with respect. Treat your environment with respect. Don't be a hero. It doesn't mean you can't have fun. You can have heaps of fun, but always learning, always improving if you're going to be wanting to get bigger bikes. If you're not, if you're just pure commuting on little step through or little scooter, then that's fine. But always respect the environment that you're riding in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Brett, for your parting words of wisdom and sharing your experience with us. So, to all our listeners out there, happy riding and safe riding. Okay, that's